He once sat on top of a rooftop in Los Angeles, pouring what he called tiger blood into a bottle, laughing at the cameras below him. The world was watching, and the world was laughing too, but not with him. At that exact moment, Charlie Sheen was the highest-paid actor on television. Weeks later, he had none of it left. This is not a story about a celebrity meltdown. Not really. This is a story about a boy who grew up in the shadow of a legendary father who became one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood, who lost almost everything in public, who carried a secret for 4 years that could have destroyed him the moment it came out, and who at 60 years old is finally telling the truth about all of it in his own words, on his own terms. The public thought they already knew this story, the headlines, the punchlines, the late-night jokes, but according to Sheen himself, almost none of it was the full picture. What actually happened behind the doors of that house they called Sober Valley Lodge? What was he really running from? And why, after everything, does he say this chapter of his life isn't the end of his story? It might be the beginning of the only version of it that matters. Stay with this one, because by the end, you may find yourself thinking about Charlie Sheen in a completely different way. To understand Charlie Sheen, you first have to understand that he was never really starting from zero, and that came with its own kind of pressure. He was born Carlos Erwin Estevez on September 30, 1965 in New York City, the son of actor Martin Sheen, a man who, by then, was already becoming one of the most respected performers of his generation, and Janet Templeton. Martin Sheen himself had once changed his name, moving away from his birth name, Ramon Estevez, to build a career in an industry that wasn't always kind to actors who didn't fit a certain mold. That decision would ripple through the whole family for decades. Charlie made his first screen appearance at just 9 years old, standing beside his father in the execution of Private Slovak. He wasn't chasing a childhood dream in the way most actors describe it. He was simply born into the machine, but being born into something and surviving it are two very different things. Growing up, Charlie wasn't the reserved, disciplined type. He was expelled from Santa Monica High School, just credits short of graduation. While some fathers might have pushed their son toward a safer, quieter path, Martin Sheen instead did something that would define the next 4 decades of his son's life. He helped him find his way onto film sets. By his late teens, Charlie Sheen wasn't auditioning like everyone else. He already had a last name that opened doors, and in an industry built on connections that mattered. But what almost nobody realized at the time was that this advantage came with an invisible cost. The sense, for years, that nothing he achieved would ever fully be considered his own. In 1986, everything changed. Oliver Stone cast a 20-year-old Charlie Sheen in Platoon, a brutal, unflinching film about the Vietnam War that would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Sheen wasn't just in the film. He was the emotional anchor of it, playing a young soldier watching his own innocence get destroyed in real time. Critics took notice. Audiences took notice. And suddenly, the son of Martin Sheen had a name that stood entirely on its own. A year later, he appeared in Oliver Stone's Wall Street, playing Bud Fox opposite Michael Douglas's Gordon Gekko, a film that would go on to define an entire era of American ambition and excess. Then came Major League. Then, Hot Shots. Sheen was becoming something rare in Hollywood, an actor who could do searing drama and broad comedy with equal confidence. By his late 20s, Charlie Sheen wasn't just successful. He was one of the most in-demand leading men in the country. And then, in 2003, came the role that would define and eventually consume the next decade of his life. 2.5 Men cast Sheen as Charlie Harper, a hedonistic, womanizing jingle writer living a life of luxury in Malibu. On paper, it was a comedy. In practice, according to people close to the production, Sheen wasn't just playing a character, he was playing a heightened version of a life he was already living. The show became a ratings juggernaut. By 2010, Charlie Sheen was reportedly earning close to $2 million per episode, making him the highest-paid actor on television. He had the money, he had the fame, he had, by every external measure, made it. But beneath all of that success, something was already quietly breaking down. The public saw a hit show and a charming leading man. But behind closed doors, reports from that period paint a much darker picture. One that had been building for years, long before it became a headline. Sheen has spoken publicly about facing what he has described as 7 separate family interventions over the course of his life. 7 times, the people who loved him most sat him down and tried to pull him back from the edge. 7 times, according to his own account. It wasn't enough. Not yet. There were multiple stints in rehab. There were reports of altercations. There were divorces from actress Denise Richards, with whom he shares 2 daughters, Sami and Lola, and from his previous marriages as well. There were custody battles that played out, at least in part, in public view. And there was a pattern that kept repeating. Extraordinary professional success, running on a parallel track with private chaos that kept threatening to catch up to it. By January 2011, it did. Filming on 2.5 Men was suspended after Sheen began treatment following what was described as a relapse. Then, in a radio interview, he referred to the show's co-creator, Chuck Lorre, using an anti-Semitic term and a series of insults. Production shut down entirely for the rest of the season. What happened next is the part most people remember, even if they don't remember why it started. In the weeks that followed, Charlie Sheen gave a series of interviews that became instant cultural phenomena, and, in hindsight, according to Sheen himself, one of the most painful chapters of his life. He described himself as having tiger blood and Adonis DNA. He called himself a warlock. He coined the word winning, which spread across the internet within hours and turned into a meme that followed him for years. He launched a self-produced webcast called Sheen's Corner, broadcasting from what he referred to as his Sober Valley Lodge, a name that, given what was actually happening inside that house, carried a bitter irony that wasn't lost on anyone. On March 7, 2011, the studio made its decision. Charlie Sheen was fired from 2.5 Men. That same day, he was photographed on a rooftop, holding a bottle and a machete, performing for cameras that had gathered below. The world laughed. Late-night hosts built entire monologues around him. Winning became a punchline stitched into pop culture. But almost nobody in that moment was asking the question that actually mattered. What was happening to this man internally that had brought him here? Years later, Sheen would call it a juvenile meltdown and openly say he regretted trading what could have been an early, graceful retirement for what he described as a hashtag. He has said that out of 55 different ways he could have handled that moment in his life, he chose the 56th, the wrong one. He later attempted a comedic stage tour, which by most accounts struggled to find its footing amid the ongoing chaos, though comedian Russell Peters has been credited with helping bring some structure back to those shows. And underneath all of it, the rants, the tour, the memes, there was something else. Something Charlie Sheen wasn't telling anyone yet. In November 2015, Charlie Sheen appeared on The Today Show and told Matt Lauer something that changed the way the entire world understood everything it thought it already knew about him. He was HIV positive, and he had been living with the diagnosis privately for approximately 4 years. 4 years of interviews, 4 years of tabloid headlines, 4 years of being reduced to a punchline, and all of it happening while Sheen was also quietly carrying a diagnosis that, at the time it was delivered to him, felt like the end of his life as he knew it. Sheen has said publicly that part of the reason he came forward was to stop paying what he described as extortion demands from people threatening to expose his status, a decision that, according to him, cost him millions of dollars in the years leading up to his disclosure. Think about that for a moment. The public was mocking a man for tiger blood and rooftop rants without knowing that, underneath the noise, he was also managing a life-altering health diagnosis in near total silence. That's not an excuse for everything that happened. Sheen himself has never framed it that way, but it is context, the kind the public didn't have while it was busy turning his lowest moments into entertainment. The disclosure was, by most accounts, an act of enormous vulnerability. And in typical fashion for how this story has unfolded, it also became fodder for a fresh wave of headlines and jokes. According to Sheen's own account, the moment that finally broke through everything wasn't a public scandal at all. It was something quiet, personal, and devastating in an entirely different way. He has described a night when he was too intoxicated to drive one of his daughters to an appointment she needed to get to. Not a DUI. Not a public incident, just a father unable to show up for his own child. Sheen has said that in that moment, he realized he wasn't even responsible enough to be available for his children's basic needs. The next morning, he says, was the day something in him finally shifted. He achieved sobriety for good in December 2017. Not the temporary, headline-grabbing sobriety that had followed each of his previous interventions. This time, according to Sheen, it stuck. Because for the first time, he says, he felt like he was the one in control of his own life, rather than being carried along by it. The consequences of that decade were not small. Professionally, Sheen went from being the highest-paid actor on television to a punchline that late-night comedy fed on for years. His relationship with Two and a Half Men co-star Jon Cryer was, by Sheen's own admission, badly damaged. Cryer was, in Sheen's words, caught directly in the line of fire of a chaos he didn't create. Financially, a fortune once estimated as high as $150 million was significantly diminished, eroded by legal battles, child support obligations, medical costs, and the kind of chaotic spending that so often follows addiction. Personally, relationships with people who mattered to him were strained for years, in some cases for more than a decade, before any real repair began. But according to those who have spoken with him more recently, including Chuck Lorre, the very man he once publicly attacked, something did eventually shift. In 2023, the two reunited on a television project, and Lorre has since described that first meeting back as something close to healing, a moment where years of damage finally gave way to something more like closure. For years, Sheen has said, he grew tired of hearing other people's versions of a story he had actually lived. In September 2025, just after his 60th birthday, he released a memoir, The Book of Sheen, alongside a Netflix documentary titled Aka Charlie Sheen. Both projects were by his own description, an attempt to finally put the complete unfiltered account of his life into his own words. The interventions, the affairs, the divorces, the HIV diagnosis, the meltdown, and the sobriety that followed all of it. Notably, his father, Martin Sheen, chose not to appear in the documentary. Charlie has described that absence not as a rift, but as something closer to his father, simply needing distance from reliving those years on camera, a choice Charlie said he came to understand, and in his words, even found kind of beautiful. He has also spoken about reaching out in the years since to people he hurt during that period, including Jon Cryer though. As of earlier this year, the two still had not managed to reconnect directly, something Sheen has said he regrets and hopes to eventually repair. At 60 years old, Charlie Sheen is not chasing the version of fame he once had. He has described this period of his life not as a comeback, but as what he calls a reset, living for the next moment, whatever it turns out to be, rather than trying to reclaim what's already gone. He has taken his story directly to audiences through a live comedy and storytelling tour launched in 2026, speaking candidly on stage about fame, addiction, and everything in between. He has also appeared at public events discussing resilience and reinvention, describing his own life as proof that setbacks, even public, humiliating ones, do not have to be the final chapter. When asked directly in 2026 about questions surrounding his health and finances, Sheen pushed back firmly, saying simply that his presence, the fact that he is here functioning, working, present for his family, answers the question better than any statistic could. His daughters, Sammy and Lola, have continued to build their own public lives, and reports suggest the family dynamic today, while not without its complications, is far more stable than it was during the darkest years of his addiction. There is something almost unbearably human about Charlie Sheen's story, not because it is unique, but because it isn't. A man handed extraordinary advantages at birth. A man who reached heights most people will never come close to. A man who nearly lost all of it, his career, his family, his health, his dignity, in full public view, while the rest of the world treated his unraveling as entertainment. And a man who, somehow, found his way to the other side of it, not because the damage wasn't real, but because he was finally willing to stop outrunning it. Charlie Sheen has said that resilience was never about never falling. It was about what you do after you hit the ground. Maybe that's the part of this story worth sitting with the longest, not the tiger blood. Not the punchlines, not the headlines that turned a man's collapse into a meme, but the quiet, unglamorous work of getting back up, years after everyone else had already stopped watching. If this story moved you, you're not alone. Some legacies aren't written by our highest moments. They're written by what we do after our lowest ones. Let us know what part of Charlie Sheen's story stayed with you the most. And if you want more honest, human stories like this one, the ones behind the headlines, subscribe, because there are always more stories worth telling.